Welcome to the 4D chess absolute mind-numbing, boggling maze that is crypto, especially during a bear market. You see, regulations and regulators often try to time the market at little points in which the market is weakest. And that's what we're seeing right now. And that was actually the statement that came out from Kraken's Jesse Powell when he responded to the idea that effectively the SEC came in when they knew their balance sheets were the weakest and they couldn't afford to potentially face fines. Anyway, what am I trying to say? The way to trade crypto is often not to look at the news and to give in to whatever news-based narrative is out there. You see, we've had this rally from 16K up to like 23K. And, quite frankly, we were expecting a retest of that 20K region. I talked about this a few videos back. Like if this is a new bull market, you're going to come back and test these most important breakout levels. Those are sitting about 20K and a half. We didn't even get down there in this, dramatic crash day. And so you have to understand and think to yourself, did the markets dump because they're now so scared of this recent news? Did the markets dump because they're actually reacting to this brand new swath of important information? Maybe, or maybe they were just going to do this and this was the catalyst to get them to go into their natural formation, the retest that was going to happen anyway on any rally, regardless of news. So sometimes the news just fits the direction, and oftentimes what I've found is that the big whales, the big miners, they'll sell into bad news if they were planning on sort of recalibrating anyway, and that'll just make it seem worse than it is, and that way they'll get a bigger dump than they would have originally gotten. So they'll time it, right? Oh, big bad news article, great. We'll do a little extra dumping here, creates more panic, right? So when you see bad news and bad charts, all of a sudden it sends you into an emotional stupor. The biggest thing is understanding that under no circumstances will Bitcoin be considered a security, and under no circumstances is Bitcoin going away. In a world where tensions are rising very, very quickly between nations, we keep getting all kinds of concerning news about that. Well, having an independent store of value, an independent wealth asset is going to become extremely exciting for the vast majority of the world that's not part of this conflict. So you have to understand, there is no narrative in which Bitcoin does not continue, in my opinion, to have an increasing amount of value against the dollar long term, right? It could be a period of very low liquidity short term, right? If we're talking about the next year or two. And this is why you plan very long term. You don't get caught up in the emotions and the swings of the market. And you understand that if you're planning several years out, that if we do dump low, then accumulating some more BTC at those levels will be good. In my opinion, even if there's a chance, a very small chance, that they try to declare that Ethereum is a security, which I find to be an extremely low, like a very low percentage chance. That would mean that effectively all of the activity around the ETH development world gets driven overseas. It doesn't go away. You can't shut it down unless you shut off the internet. No one's going to shut off the internet. And so you really need to understand that like a lot of this stuff is short term. Could some smaller altcoins get forced overseas or get some kind of clamp down on them? It's all possible, right? It's possible. But you need to understand reacting to things before it's happened is the surefire way to get wrecked in crypto land. What we do know is that we've seen Kraken get effectively settle with the SEC, assuming they paid some fine. And then we've also seen, and they shut down their staking services. Now we see that PayPal is shutting down its stablecoin services, and we see that Paxos is now under investigation. It's clear that staking, banking, and stablecoins are the things that are being targeted right now. And those are all very close to home to the banking system. So it's clear that like banking as a whole is really the target of this recent effective, I'm not going to call it a full-on attack, but it's clearly an aggressive action towards crypto. I try to avoid this emotional language because I like to stay unemotional to the most extent possible. When you get emotional, that's when you lose. When you forget that this is a game, effectively, crypto is a game. There's ever-changing rules to the game. There's an infinite amount of players, but the reality is this is a game that you can win. If you learn to play and you learn to, in my opinion, the number one thing is to not only think of what's happening and what might happen, but think of what the other players at the table, much like poker, want to happen. And when you understand what the other players, especially the big players, want to have happen, and then you think of what they might do to make that happen, and then you try to play it out a few steps ahead, that's when you start thinking like a crypto vet. That's when you start making moves against the grain that can make the most amount of money. For example, I'm not convinced that the rally's over right now. Does that mean I'm YOLOing my funds into the market? No. But if this doesn't completely break down, I wouldn't be surprised if we got a pump that makes people very confused over the next few days. See, that kind of stuff tends to happen in crypto, right? Because Bitcoin, in the end, its narrative, Bitcoin, isn't really directly affected by this at all. In fact, it might actually be a reason why people put more money into Bitcoin because they're scared of securities regulations. And the more money goes into Bitcoin, you can think of that as the sea level, the amount of liquidity in the entire industry goes up many-fold more than any other asset if Bitcoin grows. So Bitcoin growing is the biggest net positive to every single asset in the space. And so if people are starting to flee from other assets into Bitcoin, that's a strengthening of the underlying core capital of the industry. So the contrarian take here, which is always something you should be looking for. You should think of what's the consensus take, what's the contrarian take. Consensus take right now is there's a war on crypto. Cool. That's been kind of the feeling for many years, and I've seen this stop people from understanding and taking advantage of the absolute best opportunities in financial history, not only just in the last few weeks, but really in financial history, unless you're talking about buying IBM or Microsoft back when they first launched, or Apple back in the 80s, whatever. But as far as time periods, Bitcoin is the fastest appreciating financial asset in history. So understanding that is really the game is to want to buy the stuff cheap. And so if this leads to more cheap coins, I'm going to be taking a very long-term approach, not reacting emotionally, but reacting very logically and trying to kick at the tires in everything I do. If the United States becomes a place that isn't welcoming for cryptocurrency, well then, you know what I'm doing. As always, I just believe in this industry. I'm dedicated to it, and I'm going to figure out how to work around whatever problems get in the way. It's really important to realize decentralization, immutability, and really just building stuff that people want, building stuff that's important to the future. That's what I'm focused on. And regulators come and go, and in the end, there's a lot of support for this movement. There's a lot of popularity for this movement. There's a lot of people in Congress and other places that will stretch this out, right? This is not something that can happen just sort of overnight, right? And that's why you're seeing this sort of behind the scenes approach. So what am I doing? The update here is Bitcoin didn't even break below any of these significant levels. It didn't break below 21K. It didn't break below 20K. And so is this rally over? I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure this rally's over. In fact, I think the pain trade would be if people start giving up on this rally, then it rallies all the way up to say like 25 to 28K. Then people go ultra long going, oh, I was wrong. It's a new bull market. And then we crash, right? You always got to think, what's the max pain? And I know that's a really masochistic, weird way to think about it, but that's the way to get ahead of the market, is to think, how is the consensus? How are the optics right now? What's going to happen to the emotional, sort of less experienced traders? How can I think what the whales might do to extract max pain out of them? Because that's what they want to do. They're not on your team. They're not on your team. And eventually just understand that if you're taking a very long-term approach and you're taking little bits at a time, you're spreading out your risk, focusing on the major assets, and understanding that if you are going to play in altcoins, you do it with very, very small percentage points because the volatility to the downside can be extreme. At any rate, I do think that there is some really contrarian takes here that really actually make more sense if people don't want to take their money out of crypto into the banking system because of the issues that they're going to encounter. Well, then more money is going to stay in crypto. There's not going to be as much offboarding. They already have most people have stable coins. They don't need to offboard. They can just keep money in stable coins, in hardware wallets, in cold vaults. And in some senses, that's as good as a bank. So keep in mind, there's a contrarian take here that this is actually going to drive more adoption into Bitcoin, have people offboard less into other coins and into other assets. And more importantly, that if there is a drop here due to regulation FUD, something I tweeted in 2022, is that in the end, if regulations lead to more clarity, which over the long term, they absolutely do. Short term, they can be quite scary. I believe that is bullish long term for the industry, especially if they weed out bad actors. In the end, we are all on the roller coaster together. And I'm always just trying to think a few steps ahead of the game. So in summary, I'm not sure that this rally's over. In fact, I think the ultimate pain trade for crypto would be to have this rally pop back up to the 25 to 28K range, have a bunch of people get super FOMO'd in, and then have a big crash down to like the 15K range. And if 20K doesn't break in the future over the next several months, like if we're in July or August of 2023 and 20K hasn't broken yet, that's a pretty good sign, right? Again, we have the macro situation. We got to keep our eyes on that situation. And I have a few really big videos coming up on things around the economy I'm noticing, really interesting stuff, more documentary style. So if you guys are excited for that, of course, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Make sure you have that bell on as we're going to start the cryptic giveaways. It's going to be really, really fun. And as always, if these videos are helping you get through this, I know that content creators really helped me get through the last bear market. And yeah, if these videos are helping you, leave a comment and smash that like button. I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.